why do some people who support Trump also wind up believing conspiracy theories? And I said, well, today, we'll talk to an expert because there's a scientific explanation. And boy, we got a few emails. We got some social media postings, and we got some voicemails, and we'll let you vent here throughout the remainder of the show. But now let's welcome a professor of linguistic anthropology. He's at the University of Toronto. He's the author of a recent book, Politics, Lies, and Conspiracy Theories, A Cognitive Perspective. Let me read the first couple of paragraphs. I saw this at Politico.com, I think over the weekend. Why do people believe some politicians' lies even when they've been proven false? And why do so many of the same people peddle conspiracy theories? Lying and conspiratorial thinking might seem to be two different problems, but they turn out to be related. I study political rhetoric and have tried to understand how populist politicians use language to develop a cult-like following, divide nations, create culture wars, and instill hatred. Let's welcome Professor Marcel Danesi, Professor of Linguistic Anthropology, University of Toronto. Well, thank you very much for your time, sir. Why do people fall for clearly crazy conspiracies?
It is a question that I tried to answer and probably did not. But I can tell you that language has a lot to do with it. Language, not individual words, but how words are put together and connected in a narrative form that in itself, it seems to be logical, but may have nothing to do with truth. So I call that the Da Vinci Code effect from Dan Brown's novel, The Da Vinci, where he spins a narrative about, Christianity and how it could have evolved differently. And the bits and pieces are put together in such a way that by the end of the novel, you either have to reject it in total or you immerse yourself into it and then look around the world, and further clues are confirming of that false narrative.
So using the language, and I'm going to kind of skip through this because I understand that throughout history people have used dehumanizing metaphors to instill and propagate hatred. I understand that. But so in order to hack into the minds of the public, people, where do we have to start? They have to be fearful of something, right, or uncertain of something.
Yeah. Fear is always an element in how these stories are spun. The classic example is Hitler, who used fear of what was going on in the world to spin the narrative, the Aryan myth of a superior race that was being, paradoxically, according to him, victimized by other races and other people.
But it takes, that kind of rhetoric. And I don't want to use, I hate Nazi metaphors. I understand it's important for your piece and your study in your book, but there's chemical responses in people's minds that they're looking for a place to land if they're fearful and uncertain, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And it only takes a word to do it, and that word, because that word is connected to other meanings. A simple example is this one. If I were to give you a biscuit and you tasted it and liked it very much, your taste would change if I told you that was a dog biscuit. So it does have a physiological effect on neural circuitry. In other words, words are not just simple conveyors of information. They have meaning that taps into fears, emotions, and historical constructs.
And how do we turn off those impulses once we're hardwired by repeated use of metaphors or biscuits? Or, it's how is it so easy for people to focus on certain things and ignore evidence that is completely untrue?
If I had that answer, I would retroactively and retrospectively solve all the problems of history. It's so hard to, it could be a survival mechanism. I've read some literature on that. It could be for that we use these kinds of things in order to belong to a certain tribe, and therefore the narratives, the myths that we spin within that tribe reinforce our beliefs and assuage our fears. Whatever the reason, it does occur across the world. It's not some people that are more susceptible than others. We all are susceptible to it. What scared me was that in studying the great autocrats of history, they were the biggest liars of all who knew how to tap into this unconscious substratum, manipulate it, and then spread it through groupthink, which is then, and then people are easy to manipulate and control.
Professor, once people get there and they found their tribe, and they say, this is what we believe in. Could be a Mount Rushmore of lies, but we're not going anywhere. How likely are they to ever change their minds? What would it take? A cathartic event of some sort?
Yeah, probably some traumatic event where, then the awareness becomes, oh my heavens, what a fool I was to have believed this. But then you see, even then, the defensive mechanisms that we try to rationalize it in some way. Very hard to get out of it. It's like cults. When people call it deprogramming. Yeah, the deprogramming is linguistic. If somehow, some way, we can get in with the right words, touch the right buttons here and there, or circuits in the brain, as the great orator said, we might be successful.
Is it like dopamine?
Linguistic dopamine? That's a very interesting metaphor. I like it. Yeah, I guess it is.
So the bad news is we would need a terrible disruption to get people off of these beliefs, and that in itself cataclysmic, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's the story, the lesson of history. Yep. Absolutely.
So, yeah, in other words, that's not very optimistic.
No. But however, things do finally recalibrate themselves, to use a contemporary metaphor. The brain does eventually seek information, not dis or misinformation, because it is crucial to its own survival. The brain, meaning the communal brain that people have throughout the world.
Since you're in Toronto, there's a pollster here. I played some of this for my audience yesterday. He was on Fox News for years. His name is Frank Luntz. He's very good with focus groups. And he was on the Canadian broadcasting system with a talk show host the other day. And he was very, very pessimistic because of just what you wrote about here at Politico.com, that, once these people believe in what they believe, they're not moving off that position. They've bought into it. It's like what's that? When you buy into that real estate, it's so hard to get out of. A timeshare. It's like a conspiracy timeshare. You can't get out of it. And he was talking to the Canadian host, and he said, by the way, it's coming your way in 5 years. So everything we're doing here, all the craziness and the hyper-politicized world and environment we live in, he thinks it's making its way to Ottawa and Toronto sooner rather than later. So, sorry, look for that import from America.
Well, I don't know if it's from America. I think it's within all of us. And then social media have been critical in spreading the same kind of thought patterns throughout the globe.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of, they're now disbanded because the leader died, a great musician in Toronto, a terrific big band, Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass?
Oh, yeah. I used to go see them very often down in what is called Yorkville, which is now a chic area, but was not then. Way back when I was during the late 60s, 70s. Yeah, I love that band.
With all due respect to New York, Chicago, and L.A., maybe the best big band in North America, pound for pound.
No argument from me.
Yeah. And those guys, they all had those really cushy jobs in the Toronto studios, so they had no interest in moving to New York to pursue jazz or L.A. or wherever. They just, we're fine. We're in Toronto. But what a great band that was. The trumpet player, Arnie Tchaikovsky, was maybe the best in the business.
Yep. I actually knew some of them because I was a musician myself and played in the same venues in that era.
Did you ever get to sit in with that band?
No, I didn't. No.
So you're happy, professor of linguistic anthropology. I mean, you would probably be the only member of the Boss Brass to be professor of linguistic anthropology.
Well, I was probably the only one of my family who was which was an immigrant family to be one. That's for sure.
Professor Danesi, Marcel Danesi, thank you for your time. I look forward to reading your next piece at Politico. I'll look for the book and have a great day.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Take care.